Today, we're unpacking what might be the single biggest difference between organizations that have, a spectacular one-off success and those that build these empires of lasting loyalty and influence. We're asking a big question. How do you move beyond that short-term transactional motivation to something deeper, to genuine, enduring inspiration?
It's a great question. And what we're really diving into today is a naturally occurring pattern. This isn't just, some fluffy leadership theory from a business book. It's a predictable, repeatable model of thinking, of acting, and communicating. And the most fascinating part is that it's a pattern rooted in human biology. It allows certain individuals and certain groups to truly lead the rest. We call it starting with why.
Okay, starting with why. So to set the stage for that, let's revisit one of the greatest scientific races in history. The year is 1903. The prize, the first manned powered flight. And we've got two competing teams. On one side, you have literally everything money, prestige, and power could buy. His name was Samuel Pierpont Langley.
Langley, right. I mean, this guy was the establishment. He was the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, a math professor, a really celebrated scientist. He knew everyone worth knowing. We're talking Andrew Carnegie, Alexander Graham Bell, and crucially, he had the backing of the U.S. government. The War Department poured a colossal $50,000 grant into his project.
$50,000. I mean, what would that even be in today's money? It must be millions.
Oh, absolutely staggering. A fortune in the early 1900s. So he takes that money and he hires the best engineers, the best scientists money can buy. He had a dream team. The press, of course, followed his every move. They were ready, poised to herald him as the man who finally conquered the air. So you look at it on paper. He had the best resources, the best talent, the best funding. He was the logical favorite, no question.
The logical favorite. And then, hundreds of miles away in Dayton, Ohio, we have two brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright. And their situation could not have been more different. They ran a humble bicycle shop. By comparison, they were penniless. They had zero government funding. And get this, no one on their team, including the brothers themselves, even had a college degree.
Right. They were complete outsiders, totally disconnected from the established scientific community. Their team was small, their resources were incredibly scarce, and their work was, it was largely ignored by any of the major press outlets.
But they had the same goal as Langley.
Exactly the same goal, powered flight. They had the same desire for scientific achievement, a strong work ethic. But on December 17th, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, it was the underfunded, less equipped team. It was the Wright brothers who achieved the first sustained flight. And Langley, despite his $50,000 and his dream team, he failed. And not just failed, he failed spectacularly. There was even public ridicule.
The difference, according to the sources we've looked at, is that the Wright brothers started with something that went way beyond the simple goal of flying. They started with why. They believed in something.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to dissect the two ways influence actually works. On one hand, there's manipulation, the carrots and sticks that, sure, they provide short-term motivation. And on the other, there's inspiration, the thing that builds the foundation for real, long-term loyalty. We're going to see how this concept works in practice, from the incredible corporate stability of Southwest Airlines to the global reach of Apple. And we'll reveal the surprising biological mechanism, the one inside your own brain, that explains exactly why these leaders succeed where others fail.
Okay, let's jump right in then, section 1. A world that doesn't start with WHY. You talk about manipulation, and I think a good place to start is just the general danger of making decisions based on incomplete information or, based on what we assume to be true. When we don't have that foundational WHY, we're kind of forced to rely on these external, superficial facts. And that, as we'll see, can lead us terribly astray.
It's the classic concept of perceived truth versus fundamental truth. And the source material has this brilliant, almost shocking illustration of it. So imagine I describe a political leader to you. He's 43 years old. He was sworn in as the chief executive of his country on a cold January day. He was raised in the Roman Catholic faith, and standing beside him during the inauguration was his predecessor, a famous general who, 15 years earlier, had successfully commanded the nation's armed forces in a major war that ended in the defeat of Germany. After all that, the new leader spent 5 hours watching celebratory parades.
Okay, so if you're an American listener and you hear those details, the Catholic faith, the age, that January inauguration, the defeated German war, my mind instantly conjures up John F. Kennedy. It aligns perfectly with the facts of 1961.
Exactly. Your rational, analytical brain, the part that deals with what has filled in the missing context, and it's delivered a conclusion. It feels right.
But I have a feeling there's a catch.
The crucial piece of information I withheld was the date. January 30th, 1933, you were actually hearing a rational, factual description of the ascent of Adolf Hitler to the chancellorship. The predecessor was President Hindenburg, the general who commanded Germany in World War I.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful example.
It is. And the point isn't just the historical shock value. The point is that when the central truth, the WHY, the context is missing, our rational minds will just grab the nearest, most satisfying narrative to rationalize all those little details. We build a completely flawed conclusion based on perceived truths.
And that single missing detail, the date, it changes everything. It just proves how easily we can rationalize a false truth. And this reliance on rationalizing superficial details, it has catastrophic real-world costs when it infiltrates business and manufacturing.
It absolutely does. And this brings us to what the source calls the rubber mallet metaphor. Think back to American car assembly lines, say, decades ago. Executives noticed something a little strange. Right at the end of the line, there were workers using these big rubber mallets to hammer the car doors until they finally fit perfectly into the frame. And, on the surface, it solved the problem. The door fit.
So the company was fixing a flaw, but at the very last second, it's a reactive fix.
Exactly. But when these American manufacturers went to Japan to observe their counterparts, the job of the door fixer with a mallet just designed it. It didn't exist. So they asked the Japanese guide, how do you ensure the doors fit? And the guide just looked at them and said, we make sure it fits when we design it.
So one is a fix, the other is by design.
And that mallet is the perfect metaphor for manipulation and short-term tactics. It fixes the symptom, the ill-fitting door, at the very end of the process. It's a quick, observable fix. It's a what. But it doesn't address the foundational flaw back in the design phase, the ignored WHY. Sure, in the short term, you ship a car. But in a long term, those hammered doors, they're probably weaker, less reliable. The integrity is compromised.
So great leaders then, unlike those American executives, they value the things we cannot see. They're focused on the original intention, the core belief, the WHY, so that the final pieces just fit together naturally by design, because they engineered the desired outcome right from the start. And that, right there, is the difference between a transactional business and a purpose-driven one.
And this leads us to the definition of the two primary ways we can influence behavior: manipulation or inspiration. Manipulation is the common default. It's easy. It's the quick fix, the sugar high that results in a transaction. Inspiration is, well, it's the profound long-term approach. It's rooted in belief, and it's what builds lasting loyalty.
So when companies lack a clear WHY, they fall back on what they can easily control. And that's manipulation. We see these carrots and sticks everywhere in sales and marketing. Let's do a deep dive into 5 of the most common manipulation tactics, and more importantly, let's examine their long-term destructive weaknesses. So number 1, price. This has to be the easiest, most common manipulation. Drop your prices low enough and people will buy. That works instantly. You see an immediate spike in sales volume.
It works, but for the seller, playing the price game is like cultivating a heroin-like addiction, as the source puts it. The customer gets a fantastic short-term hit from the saving, but they become completely addicted to that lower price point. The second you try to raise the price back to normal, they're gone instantly. And this relentless pressure to cut costs just turns your product or your service into a commodity.
Yeah, you see it in so many industries. Mobile phone service, for one. Consumer electronics, increasingly. When your only real differentiator is price, you're just forced into this downward spiral of thinning margins. Walmart, they built a massive business on this principle. But the sources we looked at point out that this obsession with absolute cost cutting has been linked to various labor and supply chain scandals. So the price game always costs something. It's not just your profit margin, but sometimes it's the integrity of the whole operation.
That's a great point. And when you buy on price, you are not engaging in loyalty. You're not. You're engaging in a purely rational transaction. The moment a competitor undercuts you by a penny, the rational choice for the customer is to switch. And this is why these companies are constantly stressed. They have to sell more and more and more just to compensate for those vanishing profit margins. It's a treadmill.
Okay, so that's price. What about number 2? Promotions. These are the incentives layered on top. The cashback offers, the 2-for-1 deals, buy one, get one free. They're basically tactical bribes.
Bribes is a good word for it. We saw the weakness of this perfectly in the American auto industry. I'm thinking particularly of General Motors back in the 90s and 2000s. They were faced with this strong, reliable foreign competition, and instead of innovating, they doubled down on massive cashback incentives, sometimes thousands of dollars per vehicle. And yeah, sales spiked temporarily.
But the long-term cost was just devastating. By 2007, GM was losing, what was it, over $700 on every single vehicle they sold because of these spiraling incentives. They had trained their own customers to be cashback junkies. So as soon as they tried to pull back on the rebates to save the profit line, sales just plummeted. They completely destroyed the perceived value of their own product.
They did.
Yeah.
And this leads us to the deeply cynical financial modeling that's built into these promotions, the concepts of breakage and slippage. Breakage is the percentage of customers who buy the item but fail to complete all the steps required to claim the rebate. The fine print, the deadlines. Slippage is when they actually receive the promised check or the voucher, but they fail to cash it or use it before it expires.
Wow. So the retailer's financial model, therefore, isn't just built on the sale. It's built on the failure of the customer to claim the value that was promised. That's fascinating and pretty disturbing. It completely changes the nature of the transaction from a simple value exchange to a kind of psychological trick.
It definitely raises an eyebrow, doesn't it? When a company is relying on complicated fine print or deliberately inconvenient processes to ensure a portion of the revenue remains, can they genuinely claim to be customer-focused? I mean, the source mentioned a Samsung case in the early 2000s where the rebate fine print effectively excluded apartment dwellers because of a one-per-address rule. It just shows how far companies will push this boundary. If a company can't trust its product's own value, it starts relying on the customer's inconvenience instead.
Right. That's deeply cynical. Okay, on to number 3, fear. Whether it's fear of loss or fear of missing out, this is arguably the most powerful manipulator because it ties directly into our primal biological drive for survival.
Oh, absolutely. Fear overrides rational thought. Think about that classic business adage, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. That wasn't a compliment about IBM's product being the best. Not at all. It was a testament to fear. An executive might choose the known, large, slightly more expensive vendor out of the fear that if the smaller, potentially better company fails, that executive's job would be on the line. Fear trumps facts.
And we see fear used ubiquitously, from public safety campaigns like anti-drug ads to politics and business. When a local HVAC company warns you about radon gas in your home, or a cardiac specialist cites mortality statistics, every 36 seconds, someone dies of a heart attack. They are intentionally agitating your insecurity to sell you a solution. So if a salesperson's pitch requires a warning about the negative consequence of not buying, they are using fear.
Plain and simple. It's effective, but it's not building a relationship of trust. It's leveraging anxiety.
Oh, okay, number 4, aspirations. If fear pushes us away from danger, aspiration is what pulls us toward a desired future state. These are the messages that tempt us with the person we wish we were, the 5 steps to millionaire status, or, the ubiquitous diet ads with the before and after pictures.
Yes, and these manipulations specifically target the segment of the population that lacks the internal discipline to achieve those dreams on their own. The gym membership example is perfect here. Aspirations are what spur the joining. You see that massive spike in signups every January because people want to believe in the new me.
But aspiration on its own doesn't build loyalty or staying power. You need discipline for that. And discipline is a function of internal inspiration. That's what's required to maintain attendance past the first few weeks of February. The source mentions these managers a consultant friend worked with who always had time and money to fix things twice, but never the time or money to do it right the first time. They were just perpetually chasing these aspirational shortcuts instead of a disciplined long-term strategy. They were trapped in a cycle of immediate fixes.
That's it. Aspirational goals are fine as a motivator, but they're fleeting. They are the initial spark. But without the deeper WHY, the core belief about why you were disciplined, the behavior just collapses.
Which brings us to our final manipulation, number 5, peer pressure. This one appeals to our social nature, our very deep fear of being wrong or being left out. 4 out of 5 dentists prefer this brand, or join the over 1 million satisfied customers.
We inherently trust the majority, or at least the perceived expert. Celebrity endorsements are often a mix of peer pressure and aspiration. I want to be like Mike.
But sometimes these endorsements just fall completely flat because the alignment is purely transactional. There's no real connection. The example given is Sam Waterston, the actor from Law & Order, selling online trading. You're leveraging a perceived persona of trust, but there's no genuine connection to the product's function or belief system. It feels off.
Right. And the ultimate form of peer pressure in B2B sales is when a representative tells you that, 70% of your competitors are already using their service. That line is purely designed to induce panic and force a rapid decision. And as the source material dryly suggests, the only appropriate answer to that is, What if 70% of my competitors are idiots?
Exactly. It's not a reason, it's a threat.
Okay, so before we conclude this section on manipulation, we have to address the confusion between true innovation and novelty. This is a constant manipulation tactic, a huge one. Novelty is just adding shiny new features to differentiate the what. Take the Motorola RAZR, launched in 2004. It was a massive success, sold 50 million units. It was thin, metallic, beautiful. It was novel. But less than 4 years later, the CEO was out, and the stock had completely tanked. They confused the successful novelty with true, enduring innovation.
And true innovation, by definition, structurally changes the course of entire industries or even society. We're talking about the light bulb or the concept of iTunes, which completely digitized media consumption. Novelty is just the constant churning of features to stand out in a crowded market. I mean, look at toothpaste. From two types in the 70s, Colgate now offers over 30 different variations. You've got stripes, gels, whiteners, flavors.
And this feature proliferation is the direct consequence of organizations that lack a WHY. They're forced to compete solely on what, which puts them in this constant frantic race to differentiate their commodity. And the irony is, the more features you add, the harder it is for the customer to choose. So what do? They often default back to the one thing they can compare easily, price, which just confirms the commodity status you were trying to escape.
The iPhone's initial success is such a brilliant study in this difference. The touchscreen was a fantastic, absolutely, it was novel. But the true innovation was that they challenged the entire industry structure. Apple dictated to the service providers like AT&T what the phone would be capable of. They seized control of the customer experience based on their belief in simple, integrated design. And that structural shift impacts the industry for a decade, far outliving the initial novelty of the physical device itself.
So to summarize this whole first section, manipulations lead to transactions. They give you that quick hit of motivation, but they create stress, they train the customer to demand more, and they ultimately destroy your margins. They are the rubber mallet on the door. Loyalty, on the other hand, is built when a customer rejects a better product or a better price to stick with the company.
Yeah.
And they do that because of a deep personal connection.
And the cost isn't just financial, it's biological too. The work of Peter Whybrow in American Mania suggests that this constant pursuit of short-term gain and transactional wins, this endless cycle of immediate gratification, it's overloading our brain's reward circuits. We are literally conditioning ourselves and our customers to seek the sugar high, which is unsustainable and incredibly stressful for everyone involved. You look at the collapse of the American car industry, the banking crisis of 2008. These were logical, predictable outcomes when organizations operate solely on manipulation, chasing the immediate transaction rather than building trust on a loyal foundation.
A foundation of WHY.
Exactly. So if manipulation is costly, stressful, and short-lived, what's the alternative? How did the Wright brothers succeed against all odds? How does Apple maintain this disproportionate influence over markets they didn't even invent?
Well, they all follow the golden circle. The concept itself was inspired by the golden ratio, which, mathematicians and artists observed centuries ago. It's a pattern that appears everywhere in nature, offering order and predictability in the chaos. The golden circle offers that same predictability, but in human behavior.
Okay, let's introduce the visual model for everyone listening. Imagine 3 concentric circles, like a target. The largest outermost ring is the what.
The what is the easy part. Every single person and every company on the planet knows their what. It's what you make, the services you provide, your job title. It's the tangible, describable product or function.
Okay, moving inward, the middle ring is the HOW.
The HW is your value proposition. It represents your processes, your unique strengths, or, how you believe you do things better or differently than your competition. Some companies know their HOW. Many stop here, believing their unique process is enough to differentiate them.
And finally, the smallest, innermost ring, the bullseye. That's the WHY.
And the WHY is the purpose, the cause, or the belief that drives you. It is the reason the organization exists beyond making money, which, and this is important, is just a result. It's the deep conviction. Why do you get out of bed every morning? And more to the point, why should anyone listening care? Very, very few people or organizations can clearly articulate this bullseye.
And here is the central shift in thinking. Most organizations, when they market or communicate, they start from the outside in. They lead with the clearest point, the what, and maybe they touch on the HOW, the features. But inspired leaders, the ones who lead movements, they communicate from the inside out. They always start with WHY.
Right. Let's run that Apple contrast again. But let's really listen to the emotional impact of the messaging. If Apple communicated like most companies, they would start with features. They'd say, We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We have the best specs. Want to buy one. It's a perfectly rational argument. It's logical, but it feels flat. It feels like a transaction. It's pretty uncompelling.
Now, compare that with Apple's actual communication, which starts with their deep core belief, their WY. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly, and we happen to make great computers. Want to buy one?
See, the information is identical. The facts are exactly the same. But the order is reversed, and the impact is visceral. It's emotional. When you lead with the belief, you don't just attract customers who need a computer. You attract people who share your belief in challenging the status quo. The difference is just. It's radical.
And this explains Apple's flexibility. It's why they're not defined by their product. Because their WI challenging the status quo is so clear, we accept it when they sell us an MP3 player, a phone, a watch, or a streaming service. We're buying into the cause, and the products, the what, are just the tangible physical proof of that belief.
And you contrast this again with competitors like Dell or Gateway. They define themselves by their what. They made computers. That's it. So when they tried to jump into other markets, like selling MP3 players or tablets, they failed spectacularly. It just didn't feel right to the consumer because the consumer's brain couldn't reconcile the core identity, the what, with this new, different what. When a company defines itself by the product, that's all it can ever be. And this leads to the core principle. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just about clever marketing copy. This is hardwired into our brains. You're saying the golden circle is literally mapped onto a cross-section of the human brain.
Correct. The outermost circle, the what, corresponds directly to the outermost section of the human brain, the neocortex. This is our newest, most evolved brain. It's the rational, analytical language processing center. This is the part of your brain that understands data, features, and facts. When you communicate what, you are speaking directly to the neocortex.
Okay, so what is the neocortex? But the middle two sections, the HRW and the WHY, they correspond to the limbic brain.
Yes, the limbic system. This is the older, more evolutionarily primal part of the brain, and it's responsible for all of our feelings like trust, loyalty, kinship. Critically, it controls all human behavior in all decision-making.
And here's the kicker.
Here's the kicker. The limbic brain has no capacity for language. It processes feelings and it drives action, but it cannot articulate why it decided what it decided.
This biological separation explains the famous gut decision. It's not a gut decision at all. It's a limbic brain decision. When leaders communicate inside out, starting with WHY, they are bypassing the rational processing of the neocortex and speaking directly to the limbic brain, the part that actually makes the decisions.
That's it. The decision is made instantly, emotionally, in the limbic brain because it feels right. The neocortex only steps in afterward to rationalize that decision, using all the facts and features and figures, the whats, to justify the feeling. We call this justification.
I'm thinking about how hard it is to explain why you love a complex piece of art or a song. You can list the rational qualities, the harmony is complex, the brushstrokes are intricate, but those facts rarely, if ever, capture the profound emotional connection. That connection is the limbic brain at work.
It's the same mechanism when you buy a complicated product, like a high-end camera or a big-screen TV. You stand there in the electronics store, you're comparing every spec, the megapixels, the refresh rate, the number of HDMI ports, and you're using your neocortex until you are paralyzed by too much information. Analysis paralysis. And eventually, you often just throw up your hands, pick one, and say, you know what, this one just feels right.
That feeling is the limbic brain finally overriding the analytical paralysis. And I think the neuroscientist Richard Ristak pointed out that forcing decisions purely through the neocortex often leads to lower quality outcomes, precisely because you are ignoring that powerful internal decision-making center.
You are. And critically, that limbic brain governs our fundamental, deeply irrational desire to belong. It's the bedrock of loyalty. We seek out tribes that share our beliefs.
This is the Dr. Seuss story of the Sneetches brought to life. Those cartoon characters were willing to pay more and more money just to get a star on their belly, a completely superficial symbol because it allowed them to feel like they fit in with the cool kids. Our limbic brains draw us inexorably to organizations and people that affirm our own values and beliefs.
So when Apple communicates their WHY of challenging the status quo, and you, the customer, fundamentally believe that same cause, then buying an Apple product becomes more than just a transaction. It becomes a symbolic act. The glowing logo on your laptop is an emblem of who you are and what you stand for. That's staggering power for a piece of aluminum.
It really is. It changes the entire paradigm of business relationships. When the buyer's WHY aligns with the company's WHY, it creates this powerful, self-selecting tribe. This is why the U2 iPod partnership back in the day made perfect sense. U2 embodied iconoclasm, pushing boundaries. It perfectly matched Apple's belief. That shared belief made the partnership feel authentic.
Absolutely. And conversely, if Apple had partnered with, say, a performer known for traditional safe, saccharine music, it would have been immediately rejected by their core base. It wouldn't have mattered what the performer's sale volume was. That lack of fit creates immediate inauthenticity because the limbic brain senses the lack of congruence in the values.
There's not about having the best product, because best depends entirely on context and purpose. A Ferrari F430 might be objectively superior in engineering, but for a family of 6 hauling groceries, the Honda Odyssey is empirically better. Loyalty is established when the company's belief system and the buyer's belief system resonate. That creates a bond of trust that goes way beyond the watts.
Which brings us to how you actually put this into action. The golden circle is simple in concept, but it's notoriously difficult in execution. Simply knowing your WHY is not enough. For the model to work and create true inspiration, it has to be in balance. It requires 3 non-negotiable elements: clarity, discipline, and consistency.
Okay, let's break those down. Requirement 1, clarity of WHY. This has to be the bullseye. The leader has to articulate the purpose, the cause, the belief with absolute clarity. And it has to go far beyond just making money or serving customers. If the leader's WHY is fuzzy, the employees won't know why they should dedicate their time, and the customer won't know why they should be loyal.
That clarity serves as a filter. It's so powerful. It allows organizations to instantly identify opportunities or potential hires that align, and, just as important, to easily reject those that do not align with the core belief. It simplifies decision-making, especially under pressure.
Okay, that's clarity. Requirement 2, discipline of HRW. So the HRWs are the values or guiding principles that determine how you bring the WHY to life. They manifest in the systems, the processes, the culture. The challenge here, I assume, is maintaining the discipline to hold everyone from the CEO down to the janitor accountable to these principles.
That's the hardest part. And here is the critical detail. Values must be defined as actionable verbs, not as abstract, hollow nouns. It's useless to just write integrity or innovation on the wall in the lobby. What does that mean for an employee facing a tough choice? You can't tell Bob to have a little more integrity today. It's meaningless.
So instead, you need the verb-based imperative. Instead of integrity, the how W should be something like, always do the right thing, even if it costs us the short-term sale. And instead of innovation, it should be, look at the problem from a fundamentally different angle. Defining values as verbs gives people a clear idea of how to actually act in any given situation.
You've got it. And that discipline, as I said, is the hardest part to maintain. It's easy to follow the HOWs when times are good, but the discipline often collapses the moment it costs the company money. That discipline is essentially the organization's immune system. It has to defend the WHY when all these external pressures, competition, market crashes, global events are screaming at you to cut corners or compromise your beliefs.
And finally, requirement 3. Consistency of what? This is where authenticity lives. Everything you say and do, your products, your marketing campaigns, your hiring practices, customer service, all of it must tangibly prove the WHY. If the what is inconsistent with the WHY, people won't know what you believe, and they certainly won't trust you.
And authenticity is not something you can survey your customers to find. It's not a marketing term. It simply means your golden circle is in balance. You truly say and do the things you actually believe. Dell selling MP3 players felt inauthentic, not because the product itself was bad, but because it didn't align with any clear existing WHY beyond, capitalizing on a new market trend.
So when belief, discipline, and consistency all align, passion exudes from the employees and the organization. And that's what builds relationships and trust. Without that alignment, you're right back to square one. You're selling purely on price, service, and features, and you're forced to resort to manipulation just to close the sale.
Let's apply this.
Yes, let's apply these 3 requirements to a legendary case study, Southwest Airlines. Their financial track record is just astounding. They were the most profitable airline in history and famously never had an unprofitable year. They navigated crises like 9/11 and major oil spikes by leaning on this unique brand of loyalty.
And that's because Southwest was not founded to be an airline. This is the key. The founder and his lawyer, Herb Kelleher, built the company on a core belief, a WHY, to champion the common man. This was crucial because back in the early 1970s, only about 15% of the population traveled by air. It was for the elite. So Southwest wasn't competing with American or Delta. They were competing against the car and the bus. They were going after the other 85% travelers who couldn't afford or just didn't choose to fly.
That is such a crystal clear WHY, and it immediately dictated their operational HOWs. To champion the common man, air travel had to be three things: cheap, fun, and simple. So they kept it cheap by flying short-haul routes only. They kept it simple by initially offering only 2 price categories and no assigned seating. And they kept it fun by hiring people whose personalities reflected that championing, rebellious attitude. Those HOWs were non-negotiable imperatives derived directly from their cause.
And the tangible proof of all this was their advertising campaign. You are now free to move about the country.
Yeah.
That wasn't just some witty tagline from an ad agency. It was a direct declaration of their cause. They were liberating the average traveler from the tyranny of the expensive, complicated travel infrastructure.
And the result was this fierce, almost irrational customer loyalty. You mentioned they received letters and even donations after 9/11 from customers who felt a genuine sense of partnership with the brand. That kind of behavior is the polar opposite of transactional. It is the definition of belief-based loyalty.
It is. But, people will often ask the logical follow-up.
Exactly what I was going to ask. Isn't that unfair to Delta and United? They invested billions. If I'm a rational, price-conscious customer and United's TED sub-brand offers the same cheap, fun, simple flight as Southwest, why wouldn't I choose TED? Was the WHY truly the only factor? Or did Delta and United just execute the HRW poorly?
And that question gets to the core difference between trying to copy a solution and truly understanding a cause. TED and Song, which was Delta's version, they looked at Southwest and they copied the what and the HOW. They had cheap tickets, simplified routes, brightly colored planes, but since they lacked a clear founding WHY, no one knew why those brands existed beyond, maximizing a profitable market niche.
So they defined their sub-brands by the product they were selling, cheap flights, rather than the belief system they were championing.
Exactly. You can instantly copy features and processes. You can copy the what and the how do overnight, but you cannot copy trust. Delta and United hadn't earned the right to ask for our loyalty because their core WHY remained to make money for our shareholders, whereas Southwest's was to champion the common man. So customers were motivated by price or convenience, not by loyalty, which led to the rapid failure and collapse of both Song and TED within just 4 years. They were transactional from day one.
Wow. It just proves the fallacy that differentiation happens in the what or the how W. The moment someone else matches your features or your processes, you're right back to being a commodity. True differentiation is in the WHY.
And this need to constantly justify and differentiate with facts is a symptom of a fuzzy WHY. This failure to understand the deeper motive extends into how companies conduct market research, too. For decades, laundry detergent companies focused all their R&D on making whiter whites. Why? Because that's what consumers said they wanted when they were asked rationally in a focus group.
But it wasn't until deep anthropological research was commissioned that the real truth emerged. When consumers took laundry out of the dryer, they didn't hold it up to a light to measure brightness. The very first thing they did was smell it. The limbic brain was prioritizing the feeling of cleanliness, that sensory input, over the measurable neocortical fact of whiteness.
It's a perfect example of customers rationalizing an emotional decision. They said they wanted whiter whites, the what, but they acted based on the smell, the HWIY. The feeling of freshness was the true driver.
There's another brilliant example of this with the German automakers resisting the addition of cup holders to cars they sold in the American market. The engineers assumed that American buyers who valued German engineering and speed, the what, wouldn't care about something so trivial. They were stunned to realize that the small detail, which was a crucial element for commuter-minded Americans basically living in their cars, was a missing connection to the buyer's everyday life. It was a subtle emotional detail that they missed entirely by focusing only on rational facts and performance metrics.
Our decisions are just constantly guided by this limbic sense of trust and alignment. Colin Powell famously said he could make a decision with just 30% of the information, arguing that anything over 80% is often too much. That remaining 70% of comfort. That comes down to trust and instinct. It's that feeling, controlled by the limbic brain, telling him which direction feels right.
So let's synthesize this core message as we head to the end of our deep dive. Manipulations, the price cuts, the fear-mongering, the aspirations, they drive a one-time transaction. They work quickly, but the cost increases over time, and they create stress and dependence. Inspiration, on the other hand, built by starting with WHY, builds a loyal, long-lasting relationship based on shared beliefs. And that deep, sustainable allegiance is unlocked by speaking directly to the limbic brain.
That's the takeaway. Quality, service, and features are no longer differentiators. They are simply the cost of entry today. They're necessary, but they are entirely insufficient for building loyalty. To create true allegiance, you have to appeal to the heart before you convince the mind. The decision to commit to a brand or a leader or an idea is fundamentally an emotional, internal decision that we then use the facts to justify.
I think we should leave our listeners with that dating analogy used in our source material because it really puts the golden circle into a relatable personal context. Let's consider our imaginary friend, Brad.
Good old Brad.
First, we have Bad Brad. He goes on a date and he immediately leads with his what? His resume. He says, I am extremely rich, I have a big house, a beautiful imported car, I know famous people, and I play golf at the most exclusive country club. He is showing his inventory of achievements, and he's hoping to close a purely transactional deal. Does he get a second date? Well, maybe. But only if the other person is also looking for a transaction. There's no trust, there's just a list of facts.
Right. Now consider good Brad. He goes on the same date, but he starts with his WHY. He says, you know what I love about my life? I get to wake up every day to do something I profoundly believe in. I get to inspire people to achieve their potential. And the best part is constantly trying to figure out all the different ways I can help them do that. It's challenging, it's amazing, and it drives everything I do. And believe it or not, I've actually been able to make a very comfortable living from it, which allowed me to buy a house and a nice car.
Good Brad said all the same things about his wealth and his possessions. But the chances of getting that second date just went up exponentially because he laid a foundation for a relationship based on a shared purpose, not on an inventory of achievements. He led with his belief, and the what's, the house, the car, the money were simply the tangible, authentic proof of that cause. He inspired them to believe in him.
He built a connection.
He did. So here's the provocative thought for you to chew on this week. In your business, in your politics, and most importantly, in your personal relationships, are you leading with your resume, your what hoping to close a transactional deal? Or are you articulating your deep fundamental belief, your WHY, to build a foundation of lasting trust and inspiration? Are you merely dating, or are you inspiring a lasting partnership? We challenge you from now on to start with why.